Hello, everybody. I would like to personally thank L, C.A. Swan, Andrew, Rebecca M., and Anonymous for submitting their personal scary stories to make this video possible. Thank you, guys. If you have a scary story that you would like to share, please do email me at info@midnightfears.com. I love to hear them, and I will try to work every story I get into a future video. If you have already submitted a story and have not heard it yet, please be patient. It will be coming in a later upload. Also, we're coming up on 3,000 subscribers, so I want to give a huge thank you to everyone that has subscribed and liked videos and have left comments. I'm truly humbled by your continued support. If you're liking these videos and you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. I'd also like to take a moment just to wish everyone that celebrates it a happy and safe Thanksgiving. And now, to the stories. Been a long time viewer, but this is my first time writing in. I guess the real reason I'm writing in is so someone else knows what's going on. I wouldn't dare tell half of my family what's going on because they'd all think I was crazy. A little backstory. The past 2 months, I've been working at a haunted house that used to belong to the serial killer, Jeremiah Lexer. The history of what he did is sick and disturbing. And for whatever reason, the women in my family have always been more likely to see or hear spirits. One of my first nights there was slow, so I decided to walk around the room I was in, which had several original items and axe marks from the murder-suicide in 1902. And I kept seeing a black shadow out of the corner of my eye. And I thought maybe I wasn't used to the dim lighting, but I kept seeing it right behind me. A few nights later, I was sitting and waiting for my boss to do the final walkthrough before customers came in. I was sitting in my open crawl space, and I swear I hear a childlike voice say, "Play with me." Now the room I'm in is a nursery, and my character is a baby doll, and I move people through my room under a hole where another actor grabs people's hair. When I first heard the voice, I thought it was nothing, or maybe an actor downstairs, as you can hear the downstairs area when you're upstairs. But then realized no one talks like that down there. I put it out of my mind when people started coming through. That is, until the actor from the next room came in to chat with us and asked how our night was going. And after a while, I hear the same voice, "Come play." I paused, unsure if I should say anything, until the other actor said, "Was that you?" I didn't say anything. "You heard it too?" "Yes." That night I began to do reading on the Lexer family. And when he went on his final rampage, he killed his family, and the youngest of girls being only 4. Another instance that happened. A few days after that, there's 3 areas of the attraction. The manor, which is where I'm at, the barn, and the woods. I was waiting on my ride as my car broke down a few days prior, and I saw a woman in a white dress walk towards the woods, look right at me. And I've never been so terrified. My body went cold, and all I could do was stay put. I don't know why I didn't go where everyone else was. I guess I was too scared. While I'm used to seeing and hearing things, this was the first time something had been that close to me. She stared at me for probably a few seconds, but it felt much longer, and then went back to the woods. Now, most of the actors wear dark clothing. For example, I wear a black dress with red flowers. The actors in the barn wear white shirts, but none of them go into the manor. And all the other staff members wear black shirts. I went back to the makeup trailer and I talked to a girl and told her what I saw. And she pulled out her phone and showed me a picture. Well, I'll attach the picture. And needless to say, if you see that picture, you'll know who I saw. I've seen more things while working here, but I figured this email is too long. But like I said, if you want to know, I'll tell you. I began studying French in junior high school. It came easily to me from the beginning, and I always enjoyed it, never receiving less than an A in my study of it, which I pursued throughout high school, college, and graduate school. After college, I worked for a time as a French-English translator and interpreter in an embassy in Washington, D.C. No one else in my family had an affinity for foreign languages, at least not since my great-grandparents on my mother's side immigrated to the United States from Italy. I also enjoyed writing poetry from time to time. As a junior or senior in high school, I once wrote a 6-line poem in French, inspired by puppy love. It wasn't something I was particularly proud of, or even very fond of. One crisp December night, during my last year in college, I was cramming for the final exam of a French poetry class. I was curled up in a large winged back chair in front of the fireplace. I lived in a 2-story guest house on a gracious southern estate that had been turned into a dorm for the French majors. Gary was the only other student in the living room that night. He tended the fire, but was well into numbing his senses with a 6-pack of Strohs. As the smell of charred wood began to fade, and the embers in the fireplace lost their glow, I was getting sleepy. Fortunately, I only had a couple of more poems to read. Suddenly, I was startled awake. A chill struck my spine and I bolted out of my chair. There was my poem. My poem was in the book of French poetry, except that the poem in the book had 2 stanzas of 6 lines, and mine had only 1. And a couple of the words were in reverse order. It was unbelievable. When I excitedly told Gary, he just mumbled something incomprehensible. The next day I recounted the story to my professor, but his only comment was, "I suppose brilliant minds think alike." How could I write 6 lines of a poem in another language that someone else had already written? No one could explain it, least of all me. The poem could not have been a subliminal memory of something I had heard as a child. No one in my family, or any of their acquaintances, spoke French. Automatic writing? Channeling? Seems unlikely, as I have never had any similar experiences before or since. The poem in the book was written by a minor French poet who died 5 years before I was born. To this day, I have no explanation for my poem, but I have often wondered if there was some other force, one not quite founded on the conscious plane of existence, for why the French language was always so easy, almost second nature for me. Ever since I moved into my new house, weird things have been going on. It first started with inaudible voices. Then there were footsteps. Next, objects have started disappearing and reappearing, such as my Nintendo DS, my iPod Touch, and my phone. Then the items which disappeared were never to be seen again. For example, one night I was looking at my elementary school yearbook, and the next morning it was gone. Totally gone. I asked my parents if they knew where it was. They said no, and they did nothing to it. Later on, items started to fall off my bedroom shelves, such as my laptop case, my trading card collection, and my trophies. A few years later, I was eating some granola bars while reading a book, and when I got home from school the next day, my book and the granola bar wrappers were scattered all over my bedroom. My dog would usually mess up my bedroom, but she couldn't have done this because my bedroom door was closed all the way. Now, even my friends are hearing voices, and their belongings are falling off tables or shelves. It is still going on to this day. So ever since I started to listen to scary stories on YouTube, strange happenings have started plaguing my house. I live with my mom, and my dad left when I was very young. My mom works hard and tries to do the best she can to keep our lives together. I don't want to bother her with these things because she really doesn't need to hear any of this now. She would not approve of me watching scary stories on YouTube. I know she would blame the scary real-life events on me watching these kind of stories. Anyways, here are some of the things that have happened lately. I was eating cereal at the table when I heard scratching at the back door. It was maybe 9:30 or 10 in the morning. Now we have 3 cats and 2 dogs, so that is not so unusual. I went to open the door and let whichever animal it was in the house. Nothing was there. I looked around and nothing. This happened 2 more times, but at night. Each time I opened the door and nothing was there. It started to freak me out. I'm scared of the next time I hear that scratching noise. Another time I was in my bedroom trying to fall asleep. My mom was still at work, so no one else was in the house. I just started drifting off when, bam! My bedroom door, which was previously closed, flung open with such force that the handle of the door actually damaged the wall. I immediately felt a cold breeze like ice on only the left side of my face. The force was too hard to have been any of our pets, and none were even around. Later that same night, I was beginning to sleep again. I was suddenly awakened by the bed jerking. It was like someone very strong kicked it really hard. It did not feel like when you are starting to fall asleep and suddenly you wake up from a falling dream or something. I mean, it felt like someone literally kicked the bed or the mattress. I sat up completely shocked and confused. After that night, I started to lock the door to my bedroom when I slept. This is something my mom hates, but I am too afraid after the incidents of the other night. I was reading a magazine in my room with the door shut and locked before going to sleep. I heard my door handle and looked up in time to see it move slightly. My mom was not home. I tried to ignore it, but I soon heard, you guessed it, scratching noises coming from the other side of my bedroom door. I was too scared to open it. Just the other night, something else happened that really scared me on so many levels. I used to have a teddy bear, which I loved. As I got older and got rid of my stuffed animals, I kept him. He was tucked away in a bag in the back of my closet, along with some other childhood items. The other night, I got up to go to the bathroom. I opened my door and started down the dark hall. I froze in my tracks at what I saw next. It was my teddy bear, sitting right in the middle of the hallway. He was facing my door like he was waiting for me. This really bothers me. It just kind of makes me feel violated for some reason. I don't know what is going on, and my friend is going to stay with me on Halloween because I'm really afraid of what may happen that night, especially. P.S. I really like your channel, and I hope you'll read my story in one of your videos. The incidents I'm about to relate occurred during my adolescence in the 1960s. When I was a teenager, I used to babysit a lot for the young families that lived in my housing development. Within the development was a farmhouse that had belonged to the original owners of the land on which the entire development was built. No one was sure how old the house was, but it may have been built during the 1700s. The doorways and the ceilings were lower than what we're accustomed to today. The beams and studs were joined together with wood pegs rather than nails, a technique which dated back to early European settlement of this country. A little background info for this story. It was my habit before going to bed at night to sit in my bedroom and look out the window for constellations in the night sky. One late night, as I was sitting at my window, I saw what appeared to be a ball of mist, about 2 feet in diameter, walking in the middle of the street. I thought at the time that it must have been fog or gas, although it was a clear night, and there was nothing random in its movements. It seemed to know where it was going. It followed the road until it came to the corner, where it made a right and followed a path into the woods, where it floated in until I could see it no longer. I thought it very strange at the time, but then I forgot about it for a long time. Another incident occurred, which must have been so shocking and traumatic to me at this time, I would not remember it again until I'd reached my 30s. 2 years prior to this incident, I was asked by the former owners of the same farmhouse to co-babysit their 8-year-old son with their daughter, only a year younger than myself. When I was there, the girl asked me to keep her company while she set her hair. I thought it odd, but agreed. As we were talking, I saw in the mirror, standing beside me, a short man, about 50-ish, wearing an embroidered 18th century waistcoat. He had dark hair, shoulder length, stringy and greasy, very pale skin, and dark circles under his eyes. The look on my face must have alarmed the girl, and she asked nervously what I had saw. When I looked back into the mirror, he was gone, but I could still feel his presence on my right side. I didn't want to alarm her, so I said that I didn't see anything, but she didn't believe me. I could hardly believe it myself, as I did not believe in ghosts, the paranormal, or even an afterlife. I totally pushed the incident out of my mind, and 2 years later, my foster sister told me that the new owners of the old farmhouse wanted me to babysit their 4-year-old daughter on a Saturday night. I accepted the job. When I arrived at the house, their Doberman went crazy, barking at me and growling. I like animals, and they usually like me. I tried to calm the dog and reassure it, even petting it, but the frenzied barking never stopped. The owners said they couldn't figure it out since the dog was usually friendly. They put it down in the garage and the barking stopped. I was introduced to the child, who was already in bed and who would be sleeping before her parents left the house. When the parents left, I went to the living room and turned on the TV. Everything was fine until about 11:30 p.m. or so. At first, the TV picture became snowy. The picture progressively became worse until it wasn't even watchable. I shut the set off and proceeded to read when the lamp started to dim. I had to turn on a couple of other lights to have enough light to read by. Despite it being midsummer and a warm night at that, the room started to become cold. There was no air conditioner, and the windows were closed. I went to the windows and the glass was warm, as though the air outside was still warm. The houses across the street looked odd, as though I was looking at them through a thin gauze. They were very far away. I tried to open the windows, but none would budge. Then the noises started. At first it was a soft footstep, repeatedly descending the stairway about 4 or 5 steps down. Descending, but never ascending. I went upstairs and checked the child. She was sound asleep, still tucked in securely. Well, I thought I guess it's just this old creaky house. The footsteps continued, getting louder and more insistent, descending lower on the staircase, but never going back up. I checked the child again, but she was still fast asleep. I checked the second floor of the 2-story house, but found nothing. I thought that possibly a squirrel or other small animal was loose in the house. While on the top landing, I stood and I listened and I looked, but I couldn't detect any animal. When I was back down in the living room, the footsteps became pounding, this time descending all the way down the steps. I went to the staircase to watch. There was nothing. The child, still asleep, despite the noise. I was apprehensive, but believed that there must be some logical explanation for this. Then, a loud crash from the small storage room that was directly across from the top of the landing. It sounded like an empty metal wastebasket had been flung against the wall. It had a hollow, echo-like sound. I raced up the stairs to that little room and turned on the light. The room was very cold. The window closed and the light dim. The room appeared to be enveloped in a mist. I recoiled back from the cold and peered into the room. Nothing seemed amiss. Nothing was upset. I went to the child's room. She was still fast asleep, covers tucked in. She hadn't changed her position all night and must have been in a really deep sleep. Her skin felt normal to the touch, so I figured she was all right. She never stirred the whole time I was there. I returned to the living room shaken. When I'd entered that little storeroom, a feeling of electricity flowed up my spine to the back of my head. The little hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Then, the footsteps came down the stairs, onto the foyer rug. This was a shag rug. I could see imprints of something pacing back and forth on the rug. Thinking it was a small animal in the tufts of the rug, I stepped into the middle to get a better look at what it might be. It was then I was pulled to the floor, and I couldn't see anymore. I felt as though someone had thrown a rough woolen blanket over my head and held it tightly. I was being suffocated. It took all the energy that I had to crawl from that spot back to the couch, where I was finally able to stand up, feeling very drained and shaken. Now I knew that it was no little animal. The footsteps went back the same way they'd come down, the footfalls growing fainter, going back up the staircase until they disappeared. By this time, it was about 3 a.m. Warmth returned to the room. The lights regained their former brightness, and the TV worked again. The couple returned about 4 a.m. and asked me if everything had been all right. Not really knowing what to say and not wanting them to think me downright crazy, I told them everything had been all right, and I never told them what really happened in their house. The next day, my foster sister asked me how the house had been. I first just told her that it was really weird. She then told me that she didn't want to alarm me, but the former owners had told her the house was haunted by a Mr. Holt, a Dutch farmer, builder, and the original owner of the house. They said that the whole family of 4 had seen his apparition almost nightly after they bought and did extensive renovations to this 200-plus-year-old house. They researched the history and found that Mr. Holt had hung himself from the attic opening at the top of the stairs. My sister told me that they'd given her a tour of the cellar, where there were many small cubicles with manacles for hands and feet attached to the walls. No fruit cellar that. My sister and I surmised that there may have been slaves down there at one time. I found out later that this was the customary way slave owners kept their slaves in the Northeast before it was banned in the 1800s. The misery that must have existed in that house is unthinkable. That night changed my cut and dry view of the world forever.